The first person who touched the estate papers after my wife's funeral was not my son. It was Jenna. She set the folder on my kitchen table with both hands, square to the edge. Ruth's chair was still pulled back. Her reading glasses were still on the shelf by the window. The house smelled of coffee, lilies from the service, and lemon polish. My son Mark stood behind Jenna, with his coat still on. He looked at the folder, not at me. That was the first thing I kept. 38 years in a county forensic lab teaches a man to notice order when a room tries to drown it. Who arrived first? Who touched what? Who spoke too soon? My cousin Robert sat near the sliding doors. Ruth's niece Ellen stood by the counter with a paper plate she had not touched. Two neighbors pretended to help with coffee. Everyone had the careful voice people use after a funeral. Jenna did not lower hers. "Harold," she said. "Not Dad. Harold. We need to handle some practical things while people are here." Mark cleared his throat. "Jenna just means we shouldn't drag it out." "I know what she means," I said. "My attorney, Thomas Keene, had told me not to invite a fight, let the room show itself. People can deny intentions, they have a harder time denying sentences." So I let Jenna open the folder. There were copies inside, a draft transfer, a list of accounts, a page with my house address typed in bold. Our house, really. Ruth had chosen the blue tile and planted the rosemary by the side fence. She had called this oak table too serious, like it expected people to confess. That afternoon, it did. The signature lines were already marked with yellow tabs. Jenna tapped the first tab. This would let Mark take care of the house, the accounts, the bills. "You shouldn't have to deal with all that right now. I paid those bills last Tuesday," I said. She smiled with only one side of her mouth. "That's what I mean, you're still trying to do everything like Ruth is in the next room." Ellen set her plate down. Mark finally looked at me. "Dad, nobody's attacking you." That sentence told me he knew it was an attack. Jenna slid another page forward. "The trust is old. Ruth was sick, you two never updated half of this. Mark is the logical person." "Logical," I said. "Your son," she said, firmer now, "your only son." Robert shifted in his chair. The room wanted me tired enough to surrender without making anyone watch. I looked at Ruth's chair. There was still a faint dent in the cushion from the morning. Jenna followed my eyes and mistook grief for weakness. "Harold, don't make this harder than it has to be." She turned the folder so the tabs faced me. "Now that Ruth is gone, you need family stability. Sign the house and everything else over to your son, we'll handle the rest." She almost had it. Almost. Thomas had told me to wait for the sentence that tied Ruth's death, Mark's entitlement, and the papers together. Not a hint, not a sigh, a sentence. Mark whispered, "Jen." But he did not tell her to stop, he did not push the folder away, he did not say, "We came too soon." He stood behind his wife and let her put my dead wife's house on the table like a dish being passed. Jenna laughed then, a short dry sound. "Honestly," she said, "the old woman is gone. We all know where this should end." That was the sentence. I smiled, it was not kind. It was the small movement a man makes when a lock clicks. Jenna saw it and frowned. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "I wondered whether you wanted coffee before or after I signed away my life." Robert said my name under his breath. Ellen stepped from the counter. Mark's face tightened, not with shame yet, only with warning. Jenna recovered first. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You make jokes because you don't want to face reality." "Reality is useful," I said. "It holds still." My phone buzzed once in my jacket pocket. I did not take it out. Thomas was on the porch. I had asked him to wait until Jenna made the demand in front of witnesses. He had hated that part. "Harold," he had said that morning, "you don't need a performance. You need a record. Then let them make one," I told him. Now the room had made one. Jenna pushed a pen toward me. It was Ruth's blue pen from the library fundraiser. Jenna had taken it from the cup by the phone. That was the second thing I kept. "Just initial where the tabs are," she said. "Thomas can clean it up later." "Thomas already cleaned up what needed cleaning," I said. Mark's head snapped toward me. For the first time since he walked in, he looked scared. The doorbell rang. No one moved. I stood slowly. If I moved fast they would call it anger. If I stayed seated they would call it confusion. I walked past the folder, past Ruth's chair, past my son's shoulder, and opened the front door. Thomas Keene stood there in a navy raincoat, his leather file case in one hand. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "are you ready?" "I think everyone is," I said. Thomas came in without shaking hands. That was one reason I trusted him. Jenna stood. "This is a family matter. It became a legal matter when you placed transfer documents in front of my client on the afternoon of his wife's service," Thomas said. "Copies," Jenna said. "Marked for signature." Mark reached for the folder. Thomas set his file case on the table before Mark's fingers touched paper. "No one removes anything from this table," Thomas said. The room changed then. Robert's hand stopped on the arm of his chair, Ellen looked at Mark, and Mark looked at the yellow tabs as if he had never seen them. Jenna folded her arms. "What exactly are you accusing us of?" "At the moment," Thomas said, rushing. That was enough to make her angry. Thomas opened his case and took out a sealed envelope, then a second folder with a lab letter clipped to the front. "He did not hand it to me, we had agreed on that. Truth is also who touched the paper."
"Harold asked me to be present if estate documents were discussed today," Thomas said. "He also asked me to read one result aloud, if anyone claimed Mark Bennett's status as his son required an immediate transfer." Mark whispered, "Dad, what did you do?" I answered him with the truth he had earned. I waited. Thomas adjusted his glasses. "The accredited DNA report received by my office confirms that Mark Bennett is not Harold Bennett's biological child." The house made no sound. Not even the refrigerator seemed to hum. Jenna's mouth opened first, but no words came out. Robert sat back. Ellen shut her eyes. Mark stayed behind his wife, but his face lost all its color. Then he said the smallest possible sentence. "No." Jenna found her voice. "This is disgusting." "The report?" Thomas asked. "No. Him." She pointed at me. "His wife isn't even cold and he's doing this to his own son." There it was, the turn I had expected. Blood first, grief second, papers third. If she could make the room believe I had used Ruth's death to humiliate Mark, then the folder on the table could become protection instead of greed. Mark grabbed that version because it was the only one within reach. "You ordered a test on me," he said. "After everything, after 39 years. Before," I said. He blinked. "Before what?" I looked at the lab letter. I did not look at Ruth's chair, because if I looked there too long I might stop being useful. "Before today," I said. "Before your wife put yellow tabs on my house." Before she laughed. Jenna's cheeks flushed. I didn't laugh. Robert lifted his head. "You did." That mattered more than he knew. Thomas placed one palm on the folder Jenna had brought. "For clarity, a DNA report by itself does not settle an estate. It does not let my client punish anyone at this table. It does not answer what happens next." "Then why read it?" Mark asked. I answered before Thomas could. "Because Ruth learned the same truth 3 days before she died." The room went still for a second time, but this stillness was different. The first had been shock. This one had edges. Jenna looked at Mark. Mark looked at the floor. I saw it then. Not guilt, not yet, but recognition. They had expected an old man cornered by grief. They had expected signatures, coffee, relatives too embarrassed to interfere. They had not expected Ruth to have known anything before her last morning. I touched the back of her chair with 2 fingers. "The blood test is not the story," I said. "It is the reason Ruth became dangerous to you." Mark said, "You don't get to use Mom's name for this." He had not called Ruth Mom in front of other people for years. Usually it was Ruth, or your wife, or once, during an argument about the roof, the woman who raised me. Now, when the DNA report lay on the kitchen table like a blade, he reached for Mom because it was the only shield he had left. I wanted to let him have it. That was the worst part. I had taught that boy to ride a bike in the high school parking lot. I had sat through his Little League games. I had paid for braces, community college, 2 bad cars, and 1 divorce lawyer he swore was only for a friend. Blood had never been the thing that made me stay. But Ruth was dead. So I said, "I am not using her. I am following what she left." Jenna gave a sharp laugh. How convenient. Thomas opened the sealed envelope, but did not remove the paper yet. "This is not a will. It is not a trust amendment. It is a note Ruth Bennett left with a scheduled appointment card and a dated message to my office." "You met with her?" Mark asked. "She called first," Thomas said. Then she scheduled. That struck him harder than the word DNA. A lab result can be blamed on an old man's suspicion. A call from Ruth was different. Ruth did not call attorneys for drama.
She called the dentist twice before changing an appointment because she said other people's calendars were a form of property. Thomas slid a photocopy across the table, Tuesday morning, 9:46. Ruth requested a consultation about amending the Bennett Living Trust. Jenna looked down too quickly. I noticed, Ellen noticed. Mark did not, he was staring at the date. That was the morning before she got worse, he said. No, I said. That was the morning she stopped pretending. Thomas removed the note then. It was folded once, in Ruth's careful square fold and marked with her green library card. Not a current card, the old one from before the county changed the system and put everything on plastic. Ruth kept it because her signature on the back was younger than our marriage, and she said throwing it away would feel like arguing with the girl she used to be. I had found it in her bedside notebook after the funeral home left. Jenna leaned forward. Why does he have that?
Because Ruth used it as a marker, I said. For what?
Thomas answered. For this page. He placed a copy beside the lab report. Ruth's handwriting ran in narrow blue lines, not much. She never wasted ink. Talk to Harold after Keen. Not before. Change trust before Mark comes Saturday. Do not let Jenna sort night pills alone. The room read it in silence. Even the neighbors at the sink stopped pretending the cups needed rinsing. Mark reached toward the page. Thomas moved it back half an inch. Copy only, Thomas said. Mark's hand curled. She was confused. That was the first time he said it, not the last. Jenna took the word as if he had handed her a tool. She was on new medication. Everyone knows that. Harold, you can't build some ugly story out of a sick woman's notes. Ruth balanced the library budget to the penny for 22 years, Ellen said quietly. She wasn't careless with notes. Jenna turned on her. You don't know what she was like at the end.
I know what she wrote, Ellen said.
Mark swung toward me. So this is it. You let her die thinking I wasn't hers. She never thought that, I said. You don't know what she thought. I know what she did. He laughed once, bitter and young. For a second I saw the boy who used to slam his bedroom door and wait for me to come after him. I did not go after him this time. She was changing the trust because of you, I said. Jenna slapped her palm on the table. Because he poisoned her against us. Thomas looked at her hand until she removed it from the documents. No one has accused anyone of poisoning. You know what I mean. I know the words you chose. That slowed her down. I turned the copy of Ruth's note so Robert could see without touching it. Ruth called Thomas because she wanted Mark removed as successor trustee until she and I reviewed the accounts and the medication schedule. Medication? Robert asked. Jenna's face closed. There are moments when one word changes the air.
DNA had shocked them. Trust had worried them. Medication made Jenna stop breathing for half a second. Thomas took out the appointment message from Ruth's phone backup. She asked my office whether a trust change could be prepared before Saturday. She also asked whether a non-family beneficiary could receive a restricted education fund. Ellen looked startled. Me. Your literacy program, I said. Ruth wanted part of her separate account protected for it. Ellen covered her mouth. Mark heard only money leaving his reach. So Ellen gets paid and I get humiliated? No, I said, Ruth gets heard. Jenna leaned toward Mark. Don't answer him, this is exactly what he wants. But she was the one watching the hallway now, not me. I had seen that same look 3 nights before Ruth died. Jenna had been at our counter with Ruth's weekly pill organizer open in front of her. 7 plastic columns, morning, noon, evening, bedtime. Ruth had hated it at first, then used it because she could check it faster than prescription bottles. Jenna told everyone she helped, because I was bad with medication names. That was partly true. I remembered lot numbers, evidence tags, and dates on lab seals. Ruth remembered which tablet had to be taken with food. Jenna learned the schedule, after Ruth's second hospital stay, and made herself useful in the way people do when usefulness gives them access. She trusted me, Jenna said now, as if she had heard my thought. She trusted you to fill the organizer when her hands shook, I said. She did not trust you with her silence. Mark stepped beside Jenna. Dad, stop. Why? Because you're making it sound like Jenna heard her. I am saying Ruth wrote down a reason to be afraid. He shook his head. She was scared because you scared her. You find one test, one note, and suddenly you turn our family into a crime scene. Thomas closed the lab folder. No.
A crime scene is not declared at a kitchen table, but concern about access can be documented at one. That sentence kept me from saying too much. Jenna took her phone from her pocket. If this goes any further, I'm calling Dr. Shaw. She'll tell you Ruth was anxious, confused, changing doses. Did Ruth change them, Thomas asked, or did someone change them for her? Jenna's thumb froze over the screen. Mark saw it. For the first time he looked at his wife instead of me. I let that look sit between them. Then I said, Thomas, show them the last page. Jenna said, there is no last page. She should not have known that. Thomas did not look up. He placed one more copy on the table. Ruth had written it the day before the ambulance came. The letters were smaller than usual, but they were hers. If I do not speak to Harold first, check the blue drawer. The blue drawer was in Ruth's nightstand. She painted it herself with leftover library paint.
It held ordinary things: lip balm, a cat bookmark, tissues, the small flashlight she used when she did not want to wake me, and, after her second hospital stay, the spare pill organizer. Mark said, "This is sick." "No," I said. "This is what your mother did when she was afraid she might be interrupted." I walked toward the hallway. Jenna moved before Mark did. "Harold, don't. Not don't upset yourself. Not don't make a scene. Just don't." Robert stood. "I'll go with him." "Nobody is going through her bedroom," Jenna said. Ellen's voice sharpened. It was his bedroom, too. Thomas gathered the copies into a neat stack. "Robert, please observe. Do not touch anything unless Harold asks. Jenna, stay here." That was when her care mask slipped all the way off. "You can't order me around in my family's house." I turned back from the hallway. "Your family's house?" I asked. She heard it then. So did Mark. I went to Ruth's nightstand with Robert behind me.
The blue drawer slid open with the little wooden scrape I knew better than my own cough. The flashlight was there, the cat bookmark was there, tissues, lip balm, the spare pill organizer was not. Robert whispered, "Harold." I looked at the empty rectangle in the dust. Behind us, from the kitchen, Jenna said too loudly, "What is he doing in there?" I closed the drawer with 2 fingers. "Finding the first thing Ruth told me to check," I said. I did not pick up anything from Ruth's drawer. That mattered. A missing object can tell you something only if you do not turn the scene into your own mess. The empty rectangle in the dust was more useful than my anger. "Robert," I said, "stand where you are and look." He swallowed. "I see it." I said, "Say what you see." He answered, "Something rectangular was there, recently." Jenna appeared in the bedroom doorway despite Thomas telling her to stay in the kitchen. "This is insane." Thomas was behind her. "Jenna." She said, "No. He is making shapes in dust." Thomas answered, "Then you won't mind if Robert writes down what he sees." She looked at Robert and understood he was not only an old cousin in a black suit, he was a witness. Mark came up behind her. "Dad, you need to stop." "I will," I said, "after I know where Ruth's organizer went." Jenna lifted both hands. "I filled her pills because you couldn't keep track. Everyone knows that." She asked me to help. She liked that I helped. "She did," I said, "and that stopped her. She expected me to deny everything." Ruth appreciated help. She also counted things. If a bottle had 30 tablets on Monday and 23 on Friday, she knew whether 7 made sense. Mark rubbed his forehead. "Listen to yourself." I said, "I am." Thomas took a photo of the drawer from the hallway, not stepping inside. "Harold, did Ruth keep a current medication list?" I said, "Kitchen binder, blue tab." Thomas said, "Then the binder stays here and gets copied before anyone leaves." Jenna said, "That binder is old." Thomas answered, "Then you know the binder." She looked at him with pure hatred for 1 second before she put the helpful daughter-in-law back on her face. The binder was exactly where Ruth kept it, between the toaster and the old recipe box she never used but refused to throw away. Blue tab, black pen, dates in the left column, medication names in the middle, notes on the right. Thomas photographed the cover before I opened it. Jenna said, "Are we really doing this in front of neighbors?" Ellen answered, "You brought the estate papers in front of neighbors." No one answered that. I turned to the last full week Ruth had filled in herself. The handwriting was still firm there. On Thursday, a blood pressure refill was marked, picked up by J. On Friday, the night compartment was circled. On Saturday morning, the note changed. "Ask H before taking." H was me. I had never seen that note. Thomas leaned closer but did not touch the page.
"Do you have the pharmacy receipt?" I said. Ruth kept receipts in the side pocket. She did. 3 folded slips, 2 ordinary. The third had Jenna's loyalty number on it and a pickup time from the pharmacy near Oak Ridge Road. Friday, 6:18 p.m. Jenna said, "I picked up what she asked me to pick up." Thomas asked, "Which prescription?" She said, "I don't remember every bottle." Thomas said, "But you remember the binder is old." Mark said, "Stop twisting her words." I looked at the receipt, then at Ruth's note. Friday evening pickup, Saturday morning warning. Missing organizer. Not proof of death, not even proof of a crime. But a line had appeared where before there had only been fog. "Make a copy," I said. Thomas nodded. "The original stays in the binder." Mark had gone quiet in the way he used to go quiet before lying. I knew that silence. It was not proof. Fathers know many things that cannot be placed in a file. That is why I waited for Thomas to ask the next question. "Who came to the house Friday night?" Jenna crossed her arms. "People were in and out all week." I said, "Not after 10. Mark looked at me. "You were asleep." I said, "The doorbell camera wasn't." He shut his mouth. Ruth had wanted that camera after a package went missing 2 summers earlier. She called it my little doorman. I called it one more password to forget. After she died, I pulled the backup because I could not stand the thought of deleting the last ordinary days by accident. Thomas had the still image already printed. He placed it beside the receipt. Friday, 10:42 p.m. Mark at the porch, face turned sideways, one hand on the rail. Jenna's pharmacy bag was in his other hand, the logo folded but visible enough. Jenna said, "That could be anything." Thomas said, "It could." He did not push harder, and that restraint made the image heavier. Mark said, "Mom asked me to come." I said, "Ruth didn't mention that in the binder." He answered, "She didn't write down every breath." I said, "No. Only the ones she was afraid might matter." Robert leaned over the copy. "Mark, why didn't you say you came that night?" Mark's eyes moved to Jenna, then back to the table. "Because Dad would make it ugly." Jenna seized the opening. "Exactly. He sees a bag and turns it into murder. This is grief. This is what grief does." I let the word murder pass. I had not used it. She had. Thomas wrote that down. Jenna saw him do it and changed color. "Are you taking notes on me now?" Thomas said, "I have been taking notes since I arrived." That was when Ellen spoke from the counter. "Ruth left me a voicemail Friday." Every head turned. Ellen looked frightened by the attention, but she did not take the words back. "It was broken up. I thought she had called by accident. I saved it because it was Ruth." Jenna said, "Why didn't you say that before?" Ellen answered, "Because before today I thought my aunt died in her sleep." Ellen took out her phone. Her hands shook so badly Thomas asked her to place it on the counter and press play from there. The message was only 23 seconds. Mostly fabric noise. A click. Ruth breathing. Then her voice, thin and irritated. "Not mine. Those aren't." Static swallowed the next part. Then Ruth again. "Mark knows. Tell H." The message ended. No one moved. It was not enough. That was the cruelty of it. A voice from the dead should have been enough for any decent room. But rooms are not courts. And grief is not chain of custody. Thomas asked Ellen not to play it again. "Email it to me, untouched. Do not trim it. Do not forward it to anyone else." Jenna's eyes filled, suddenly and perfectly. She was scared because Harold was filling her head. He probably told her the pills weren't hers. He was jealous. He had a DNA test hidden, and he was jealous. Mark took that like oxygen. "Dad," he said, "what did you do to her?" I looked at my son and understood the next danger. They did not have to prove I was wrong. They only had to make me look like a grieving widower, building a story out of dust, old notes, and a broken voicemail. So I did the hardest thing in the room. I shut up. Thomas looked at me once. a warning and approval in the same glance. Then he turned to Jenna. No one here is making a medical conclusion. We have a missing organizer, a medication note, a pharmacy pickup, a doorbell timestamp, and a damaged voicemail. Each one is limited. Together, they are enough to preserve. Preserve for what? Mark asked. Thomas said, for the people whose job it is to decide what they mean. Jenna stepped back. We are leaving. Thomas said, not with the folder. She said, it's ours. Thomas answered, it is on Harold Bennett's table, prepared for Harold Bennett's signature, concerning Harold Bennett's house. Robert moved closer to the hallway without being asked. Ellen put her phone in both hands like it had become fragile.
Jenna grabbed Mark's sleeve. Come on. Mark did not move right away. He was looking at the photo from the doorbell camera, at himself, at the pharmacy bag. Mark, she snapped. He bent toward her, and I heard only because the room had gone so quiet. Why did you keep the bag? Jenna's answer was lower, but not low enough. Because the organizer should have been gone. Thomas stopped writing. Robert looked at me. Mark straightened slowly. Jenna realized the whisper had traveled. Her face changed in pieces, anger first, then calculation, then the old, helpful mask trying to come back and finding no place to sit. I did not ask what she meant, I only said, Thomas, write that sentence down exactly. And he did. Jenna did not deny the sentence. That was the third thing I kept. People who are falsely accused usually run toward the exact word. They say, I never said that. I didn't mean that. You heard wrong. Jenna did none of it.
She looked at Mark first, then at Thomas's pen, then at the folder she could no longer take from the table. This is abusive, she said. Not false, abusive. Mark grabbed the word as quickly as he had grabbed jealous. She's right. Dad, listen to yourself. You're making everyone stand around while you accuse us with a broken voicemail and dust. I asked where the organizer went, I said. Because you're not thinking straight. There it was. The next door opening. Jenna stepped through it. Harold, you stood at your wife's service this morning. You just heard a DNA test in front of family. No one would be okay after that. Her voice softened until it sounded almost professional. We need to call Dr. Shaw. Robert looked uncertain. That was how the danger entered. Not through Jenna's shouting, through Robert's uncertainty. He had seen the dust, the receipt, the doorbell image. But he had also seen me stand in my dead wife's bedroom and talk like a lab report could hold grief together. Thomas said, for what purpose? To make sure he is safe, Jenna said. He has medications in the house. He has documents everywhere. He's talking about murder. You used that word first, Thomas said. Because that's what he's implying. Mark moved beside her. Dad, give me the folder, just for tonight. We'll all come back when you've slept. The offer sounded gentle. It would have taken the papers, the binder copies, Ruth's note, and the room's attention out of my hands. I looked at Robert. Do I sound unsafe to you? He did not answer fast enough. Jenna saw it and dialed. She put the phone on speaker before anyone agreed. That was another kind of control. Make the call public, force the room to behave as if the call already had authority. Jenna. Dr. Linda Shaw sounded tired. Is Ruth's service over? Jenna closed her eyes, performing strain. Yes. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm at Harold's. He's very upset. He found some old notes of Ruth's, and now he's saying Mark and I did something with her medication. I did not say that, I said. Jenna spoke over me. He's got an attorney here. He's going through drawers. He's refusing to let Mark help with paperwork. Dr. Shaw paused. Harold, are you there? I'm here. Have you slept? That question did more damage than an accusation. People understand sleep. They understand grief. They understand an old man awake too long in a house with medicine bottles. Not much, I said. Mark looked relieved. Thomas said, Doctor, this is Thomas Keene, estate counsel for Mr. Bennett. No one is asking you for a diagnosis over the phone. Jenna called you in the middle of an evidence preservation issue. Evidence? Dr. Shaw asked. Jenna made a small sound. See, this is what I mean. Robert finally said, there is a missing pill organizer. Jenna turned on him. You saw dust, Robert. I saw an empty place where Harold said it was kept. That helped, but not enough. Dr. Shaw's voice became careful. Harold,
If there are medications missing, I would rather someone calm secure the bottles until we know what's going on. Someone calm, Jenna repeated softly. Mark held out his hand for the binder. I did not give it to him. That small refusal turned the room colder than the DNA report had. Dad, Mark said, don't make me do this in front of everyone. Do what? Protect you from yourself. There it was, dressed like love. Thomas placed his palm flat on the binder. Mark, if you touch this without Harold's permission, I will note it. Note everything, Mark snapped, that's all you people do. You people. Attorneys, witnesses, old men who remember. Anyone between him and a clean version of the afternoon. I looked at Robert. Will you stand at the hallway? Jenna said, why? So no one sees what else you plant. I let Thomas answer. So no one enters Ruth Bennett's room while we are all in here. Robert rose.
He was still uncertain, but uncertainty is not the same as surrender. He took a place where he could see the kitchen and the hallway. That changed the map of the house. Jenna saw it immediately. Dr. Shaw was still on the phone. Harold, I don't know what is happening there, but if the situation is escalating, maybe everyone should step back. That's what we're trying to do, Jenna said. Mark can take the papers, the pill bottles, and Harold's keys for tonight. He shouldn't be alone. Papers, pill bottles, not comfort, control. I said, Doctor, please listen carefully. I am not asking you to decide anything. I am asking you to remember that Jenna called you before anyone called the sheriff, before anyone called the pharmacy, and before anyone copied Ruth's medication binder. The line went quiet. Thomas wrote that down too. Jenna stared at my phone, as if she could pull the words back through the speaker. Dr. Shaw said, Jenna, I can't tell anyone to remove documents. If Harold is coherent and his attorney is present, I can't make that call. Jenna's mouth tightened. So we wait until he hurts himself. That did what she wanted. One neighbor put a hand to her throat. Robert glanced at me from the hallway. Even Ellen looked shaken, because no decent person wants to be the one who ignored a warning about an old man in grief. Mark lowered his voice. Dad, just sit down. Please. Let me handle tonight. Tomorrow we can talk about whatever you think you found. Whatever I think I found is on the table, I said. No, it's in your head. The room flinched. He had crossed from worried son to witness for Jenna's story, and everyone heard it. Thomas closed the binder. This conversation is now about Harold's capacity, not Ruth's medication. I want that clear. Fine, Mark said. Maybe it should be. I felt the first real anger then. Not hot. Hot anger burns itself out. This was cold, exact, almost useful. My son was willing to make me look unsafe in my own kitchen to get control of the objects on the table. Dr. Shaw said, Harold, are there firearms in the house? Jenna looked almost relieved. No, I said, Ruth hated guns. Any controlled medications? Ruth's prescriptions are in the kitchen cabinet unless someone moved them. That sentence pulled everyone's eyes toward the cabinet, everyone's except Thomas's. He was watching Mark. Mark had stepped backward during the doctor call, not toward the front door, not toward Jenna, but toward the hallway Robert was supposed to watch. Robert had turned his head at the word prescriptions. That was all Mark needed. He slipped past him. Thomas said, Robert. Too late. I went after him, but I did not run. Running would have helped Jenna. She was already saying, see how he is. Into the phone, giving Dr. Shaw a soundtrack instead of facts. Mark reached Ruth's bedroom first. He did not look at the bed. He did not look at the framed photo on the dresser or the sweater folded over the chair. He went straight to the nightstand, then stopped when he saw the blue drawer open and empty. That told me enough to hurt. What were you looking for? I asked. Nothing. You don't move like that for nothing. Robert came up behind me, breathing hard. Mark, step away from the drawer. Mark looked over my shoulder toward the kitchen. Dad is blocking the bedroom now. Are you all seeing this? He was performing for the room he had just left. Thomas stayed in the hall, phone in hand. Mark, if you remove anything from this room, I will call the sheriff before you reach the porch. For what? Looking in my mother's room. The word mother struck, but not as deep as he wanted. Ruth's note was on the table. Ruth's voice was in Ellen's phone. Ruth's missing organizer had left its shape in the dust. I said, if you came for grief, look at her chair. If you came for something else, maim it.
Mark's jaw worked. From the kitchen Jenna called, too bright, too fast, Mark, come back here. Don't let him bait you. He looked once more at the drawer. Then at the closet. Then at the small trash basket beside Ruth's reading chair. I saw the path his eyes made. Thomas saw it too. Harold, he said quietly, do not touch that basket yet. That was where part of me understood we had not found the missing thing. We had found the room where someone had come back for it. The trash basket beside Ruth's reading chair was wicker, cheap, and stubborn. She bought it at a church sale because a fifth-grade boy had painted one crooked blue flower on the side. It had held tissues, yarn scraps, old receipts, and the paper sleeves from cough drops. I had emptied it 3 days before the ambulance came. Now it held a pharmacy bag. Not Jenna's bag from the doorbell photo. This one was older, folded flat, tucked under a tissue box and a magazine Ruth had finished the week before she died. Thomas photographed the basket before anyone touched it. Mark watched him do it with the trapped look of a man who had expected either nothing or too much. That proves nothing, Mark said. No one said prove, Thomas answered. We said preserve. Robert stood in the doorway, pale now. The room no longer looked like family drama to him. It looked like a place where objects had been moved after a woman died. Jenna pushed past Ellen in the hall. Mark, get out of there. Thomas lifted one hand. No one comes in. You don't own this house. Neither do you. That hit harder than he meant it to, because she stopped. I looked into the basket from where I stood. Inside the folded bag was a small white pharmacy label, torn so the drug name was missing. Ruth would never tear a pharmacy label. She soaked labels off jars before recycling them because she said names deserved privacy, not destruction. Mark said, Dad planted that. The room heard it.
That was the midpoint damage. Not that he said something cruel. He had said cruel things before. It was that Robert looked at the basket, then at me, and for half a second wondered whether grief could make a careful man too careful. Jenna saw Robert's doubt and fed it. Harold has been alone in this room for days, she said. He had access to everything. He had the DNA test. He had the notes. Now suddenly every drawer and trash can says exactly what he wants it to say. Ellen said, that isn't fair. Fair. Jenna turned on her. He is accusing us of killing Ruth because Mark isn't his blood. You think fair is still on the table? Dr. Shaw's voice came thin through the phone from the kitchen. Harold, I need to ask directly. Have you moved any of Ruth's medication or pharmacy bags since she died? No. Have you thrown anything away? Funeral flowers. Coffee filters. Nothing from her nightstand. Jenna called out. He doesn't know. That's the point. He's exhausted.
Mark stepped into it with her. Dad, please, let Thomas keep his copies. Let me take the medication stuff somewhere safe. If you're right, it'll still be there tomorrow. If I am right, I said, tomorrow is what you need. He flinched, but Robert did not see it. Robert was watching me. Harold, he said gently, and that gentleness hurt worse than Mark's accusation. Maybe sit down for a minute. There are rooms where a man loses by shouting and loses by obeying. If I shouted, I became what Jenna described. If I sat, Mark got closer to the basket, the binder, the bedroom. Thomas solved it by moving first. He stepped between Mark and the basket. No one removes evidence. Not Harold, not Mark, not Jenna, not me. Jenna said, hear that, evidence. He already decided. And Dr. Shaw, trying to be careful, said, maybe a neutral third party should hold the medications. Jenna smiled without showing teeth. That smile made me tell the truth I had protected for 29 years. Mark, I said, I knew. He stared at me. I knew before your 10th birthday. The room changed again, but this time it did not move toward Jenna, it moved toward me with a kind of horror. Not because I had kept a secret, because everyone suddenly understood the size of it. Mark's mouth opened, nothing came out. I kept going because stopping would have turned the truth into a weapon instead of a record. Your mother told Ruth after she was diagnosed the first time, I said. Ruth told me because she thought marriage meant I deserved the truth. I ordered a test then, quietly. I was angry for 3 days. Then you came into the garage with a broken model airplane and asked if I could fix the wing. Mark looked away. I fixed it, I said, and I stayed. Jenna whispered, this is manipulative. No, I said, manipulation is using blood today to make me look jealous. Blood did not raise him, I did. Dr. Shaw said nothing.
Robert sat down on the edge of Ruth's bed, and then stood immediately, embarrassed by where he had landed. Mark's face had gone past pale. You knew all that time. Yes. And you let me call you Dad. That one almost did it. I held the back of Ruth's chair in my mind and answered from there. I didn't let you. I was your dad. For 1 second, the room belongs to the boy in him. Then Jenna took it back. If that's true, she said, then this is even sicker. You waited until Ruth died to punish him. Mark did not defend me. That silence cost more than the DNA report. I had expected rage. I had expected denial. I had not expected him to let Jenna turn 29 years of fatherhood into a trap I had sprung after Ruth's death. Robert said, Mark. Mark raised one hand. No. I need to understand this. He looked at me with wet eyes and a stranger's mouth. You knew I wasn't yours and you never told me. Ruth asked me not to. And now Ruth can't answer. Jenna stepped closer to him. Exactly. There it was again, dead Ruth as a wall they could put between me and the room. Thomas reached into his file case. Jenna saw the movement. What now? A condition, Thomas said. A what? Ruth left a second envelope. Harold did not open it. I did not open it. It was to be opened only if someone in this house claimed Harold was confused, unstable, or acting out of jealousy over Mark's parentage. Jenna went still. Mark looked at her. You knew. No, she said too fast. Thomas held up the envelope. Ruth's handwriting crossed the front in blue ink. If they say Harold has lost his mind. Dr. Shaw was still on speaker. She heard it. Everyone heard it. Jenna said, anyone could write that. Ellen answered before I could. Not like Ruth. Thomas did not open the envelope yet. Before this is read, everyone should understand the limit. A letter is not a verdict. It does not prove medication tampering. It does not make Harold write about every fear. It only shows what Ruth anticipated. Open it, I said. My voice sounded older than I meant it to. Thomas broke the seal with a small letter opener from his case. He unfolded one page. Ruth had written only half a page. That was Ruth. She trusted plain words more than long ones. Thomas read, Harold, if this is being opened they have called you confused. I am sorry. I should have spoken sooner. Jenna said, this is theater. Thomas looked at her until she stopped. He continued, Mark is not the blood issue. Harold knows. He chose love. I chose silence because I wanted one family, not 3 ruins. Mark's face folded around that sentence. Thomas read slower. The issue is Jenna's vitamins, the night pills, and Mark asking too many questions about the trust before I was ready to tell Harold. If I am wrong, forgive an old librarian for cataloging fear. If I am right, do not let love make you polite. The room did not move. Dr. Shaw whispered, Oh, Ruth. That was the first human sound the phone had made all afternoon. The letter did not clear me. It did not convict Jenna. It did not tell us where the organizer went, what had changed, or why Ruth's voice message broke where it broke. But it did one thing Jenna could not easily undo. It proved Ruth had expected the attack on my mind before Jenna made it. Robert looked at me differently then. Not with certainty. Certainty would have been too easy. But the doubt that had hurt me turned toward the other side of the room. Jenna saw it happen. Mark, she said, we're done here. Mark did not answer. He was still staring at Ruth's line. He chose love. I almost pitied him. Then I remembered the empty rectangle in the drawer. Thomas folded the letter back along Ruth's crease. This envelope stays with me. The basket stays untouched. The binder stays copied. And nobody takes the medications tonight. Jenna's mouth hardened. The midpoint was not victory. It was worse than that. It was the moment everyone understood Ruth had left a path because she had known someone might try to erase it. Jenna tried to attack the envelope first. How do we know when she wrote it? She said. How do we know Harold didn't make her write it after he scared her with that test? It was a good attack because it sounded like caution. That was Jenna's gift. She could wrap suspicion in common sense and make other people feel foolish for not holding it. Thomas did not argue with her tone. He turned the envelope over and pointed to the back. Ruth sealed this with library tape. Tape, Mark said. Ellen gave a broken little laugh. Aunt Ruth used that for everything. The strip had tiny blue letters from the county library's supply drawer. Ruth had brought home a roll when the branch closed for renovation and then treated it like treasure. It was on Christmas packages, recipe cards, and the box where she kept old tax returns. Thomas placed the envelope beside the appointment message. The seal is intact in the photo Harold sent me Saturday morning before he brought it in. The appointment request came Tuesday. The phone backup places Ruth's message to Ellen Friday, again, not proof of a crime, proof that Ruth prepared before this room called Harold confused. Dr. Shaw said, that changes my concern. Jenna's head snapped toward the phone. Doctor, she said, you are hearing one side. I'm hearing enough to know I should not be used to remove documents from a grieving patient over speakerphone. The word used landed cleanly. Mark turned away from the table. He could not fight the doctor, the tape, the message, and Ruth's handwriting at once. So he chose the only person he still believed he could hurt. He chose me. You should have told me, he said, I had no defense that would not sound like another injury. So I gave him the plain one. Yes, I said. That answer unsettled him more than denial. That's it. No. It is not all of it, but yes.
Jenna moved toward him. Mark, don't let him make this about feelings. He hid who you were. I knew who he was, I said. No, you knew what he wasn't. For a second, I almost hated her for being clever. Then I looked at Mark and remembered, cleverness was not the crime was what they were trying to build with it. You were the boy who slept with one foot out of the covers, I said. You were the teenager who stole my socket wrench and returned it cleaner than before. You were the man Ruth defended when I said you borrowed too much and called too little. That was who you were. Mark's eyes reddened, and now, he asked. That question was a bridge and a trap. I did not cross it. Now Ruth is dead, I said. Now her pill organizer is missing. Now your wife laughed over estate papers. Now you came here with a pharmacy bag and did not say so until a camera put you on the porch. Jenna said, he came because Ruth asked. Then why did Ruth say Mark knows? No one answered. Thomas used the silence. We need the full doorbell backup, not just the still. Harold, where is it stored? Cloud account. Ruth's email. Jenna said, you don't have her password. I looked at her. She realized too late that she had answered before I did. Ruth wrote passwords on recipe cards. I said, blue box. Ellen found the blue recipe box because she was the only person Ruth would have forgiven for touching it without asking. She opened it on the counter, not the table, and read the tabs like a librarian's niece. Pie crust, soups, garden, passwords. Jenna said, this is ridiculous. Thomas said, ridiculous things often preserve better than clever ones. The doorbell login was on a card for lemon bars. Ruth had written the password under the ingredient list and drawn a tiny lock beside it. I almost smiled. Then I saw Mark watching the card like it might accuse him by itself. Thomas logged in from his tablet. He did not let me do it. That was wise. Jenna would have said I selected what I wanted. Thomas downloaded the full Friday night clip and turned the screen so Robert and Ellen could see. The video was not dramatic. That made it worse. Mark came up the walk at 10:42 p.m., no hurry, no panic. He rang once, then used his key before Ruth reached the door. The porch light made Jenna's pharmacy bag clear for 3 seconds. Mark looked over his shoulder before going in. The clip skipped after that because the camera only caught the porch. That's all, Jenna said. That is enough to place him here, Thomas said. With groceries. With a pharmacy bag. Mark spoke without looking at Jenna. She asked me to bring it. Ruth asked you. I said, yes. Then why did you use your key before she opened the door? He said nothing. On the video, 26 minutes later, Mark came out without the bag. That was still not proof. But it made the missing organizer heavier. Thomas returned to Ruth's second letter.
There is one more instruction. Jenna said, of course there is.
He ignored her. Ruth wrote, if the night pills are questioned, check the old phone backup before the new one syncs. She underlined old. That was Ruth too. She trusted yesterday more than today because yesterday had fewer chances to be edited. Ellen said, her old phone is in the sewing drawer. Jenna's head turned so sharply I heard her earrings click. Mark saw it, so did I. Thomas said, no one moves. You can't freeze us in place, Jenna said. I can call someone who can, Thomas said. For the first time, the word sheriff entered the room without sounding theatrical. Dr. Shaw said, I need to end this call. Thomas, if there is a medication concern, document and contact the proper authorities. Harold, do not take any medication from containers you do not recognize. I won't, I said. Jenna said, Doctor, wait. But Dr. Shaw was already done being useful to her. The call ended. Silence came back, thicker now. Ellen retrieved the old phone because Thomas asked her, and because Jenna had made it clear where not to look. The phone was dead. Thomas plugged it into the charger by the counter. Nothing happened at first. Jenna laughed once. There, another ghost. Then the Apple logo appeared. No one said a word. The phone took so long to start that I could hear Ruth in my head complaining about updates. When it finally opened, there was no miracle waiting on the screen. No confession, no video. Only a voice memo app with one file marked Friday 10:59 p.m., unsent. Thomas did not play it. He looked at me first. Are you ready? No, I thought. I nodded. The old recording was clearer than Ellen's voicemail, and worse because of it. Ruth's voice came first, low and angry. These are not the ones from my bottle. There was a scrape, maybe the nightstand drawer. Then Mark. Not loud. Not the voice from the kitchen table, smaller. Mom, don't start. Ruth again. Jenna said vitamins. These are not vitamins. Mark, did you know? The recording cracked into static. A thump, Ruth breathing, then only one more clear sentence. Tell Harold before Saturday. The file ended. No one breathed normally after that. Thomas saved a copy without renaming it. This still does not tell us what the tablets were. It does not prove who changed them. It does not prove cause of death. But it proves she asked Mark, Ellen said. It proves she recorded that question, Thomas said. That is the limit. I was grateful for the limit. Limits keep grief from becoming a liar. Mark sat down on the edge of the kitchen chair as if his legs had forgotten him. Jenna did not comfort him. She looked at the old phone, then the hallway, then the folder. Thomas saw that too. Jenna, he said, where is the pharmacy bag from Friday night? I don't know. Mark said, very quietly, you told me to throw it out. The room turned toward him. Jenna's face emptied.
Mark looked at the doorbell still, at the old phone, at Ruth's letter, and finally at me. I brought the bag, he said. I didn't know what she put in it. That was not a confession. It was the first crack. Thomas closed the old phone in an evidence bag from his file case, because Thomas Keene was the sort of attorney who carried things normal people laughed at until they needed them. Now, he said, we call Frank Mercer. Jenna said, who is that? Someone who knows what not to touch, Thomas said. Frank Mercer arrived 23 minutes later in an old brown jacket and shoes polished better than the rest of him. He had been a sheriff's investigator before his knees and county politics retired him. Thomas used him when families needed someone who knew the difference between a dramatic accusation and a useful record. Frank did not bring a badge. He brought gloves, paper envelopes, and the kind of silence that made people explain too much. Jenna said, who invited him?
Thomas answered, I did. As a consultant. Consultant for what? Frank looked at the table, the binder, the old phone, the copied doorbell still, the sealed letter, and Ruth's hallway. For not ruining what you already have. That sentence calmed me more than comfort would have. Frank asked everyone to stay in sight of the kitchen table. He did not order, he arranged. Robert by the hallway, Ellen near the counter, Mark and Jenna on the far side where they could not reach the folder without crossing Thomas. Me at Ruth's chair, because I would not sit in it, and everyone knew why. Then he built the chain out loud. Trust appointment Tuesday. Medication note Friday morning. Pharmacy pickup Friday evening. Mark on porch with pharmacy bag Friday night. Voice memo at 10:59. Missing organizer after death. Torn pharmacy label in basket. Attempt today to remove papers and medication items. Jenna said, "You skipped the part where Harold hid a DNA test for decades." Frank nodded.
Because that explains motive pressure. It doesn't explain a missing organizer. Mark stared at him. For the first time all day, a stranger had separated blood from the thing Ruth died around. Frank asked for names, not stories. Who saw Jenna with prescriptions that week? Ellen said, the pharmacist would have pickup records. Frank nodded. Good. Who saw Mark here Friday night besides the camera? Robert frowned. Maybe Mrs. Alvarez next door, her porch faces the street. Jenna's face tightened at the name. Frank noticed. Call her from your phone, Harold, speaker on, ask only what she saw. Mrs. Alvarez answered on the fourth ring, breathless and suspicious because funerals make neighbors afraid of being needed. When I asked about Friday night, she did not hesitate. She had been watering the lemon tree late because the heat had burned the leaves. She saw Mark's car. She saw him go in with a pharmacy bag. She saw Jenna's SUV parked around the corner, not in our driveway. Mark turned toward Jenna. Jenna said, I was waiting because Ruth didn't want too many people in the house. Ruth was alive then, Frank said. She could have said that. Mrs. Alvarez added one more thing before hanging up. He came out without the bag. I remember because I thought, men, always leaving the errand for the women. It was a neighbor's joke. In the room it landed like a nail. Frank wrote the time, the name, and the exact words. Now the bag has 3 places. Pharmacy receipt, doorbell image, neighbor observation. Thomas added, and Mark's statement that Jenna told him to throw it out. Mark said, I didn't say throw it out. Jenna looked at him. Frank lifted his pen. Then say it clean. Mark swallowed. She told me the bag couldn't stay here. That was not truth yet. But it was no longer their old lie. Jenna asked to use the bathroom. Frank said, no. She said, you can't stop me from going to the bathroom. Frank answered, I can ask Ellen to stand in the hall, with the door open and your purse on the kitchen counter. Jenna did not go. Mark stared at the table for a long time. Then he said, Dad, can I talk to you outside? Thomas answered before I could. No private conversations. I'm talking to my father. The word father made Jenna inhale sharply. I should have let Thomas say no again. Instead I said, by the sliding door. Everyone can see us. That was my weakness. Not trust. Not forgiveness. Habit. A son asks, a father makes space, even after the room has shown him what that space costs. We stood by the glass with the table behind us and the backyard dark beyond it. Mark kept his voice low. Let the DNA stay private from here, he said. It is already not private. I mean legally, publicly. Don't put it in whatever Thomas files. Don't make that the story. It isn't the story. Then prove it. His eyes moved toward Jenna. Let probate happen clean. Keep the house in the family. I'll make sure Jenna backs off. We can handle the medication stuff quietly. There it was. Not an apology. Not fear for Ruth. A trade. Handle it how? I asked. He said, I don't know. Pay for whatever review you want. Move some money to Ellen's program, if that makes you feel better. But don't burn everything down because you're hurt. I looked at the man I had raised. You think this is about hurt? He answered, what else is it? Behind him, Ruth's empty chair faced the table. Your mother died, I said. Mark flinched at your mother. Good. You brought a pharmacy bag into this house the night Ruth recorded that something was wrong, I said. You left without the bag. Today your wife put transfer papers in front of me before Ruth's chair was cold. I didn't know what Jenna did. I said, then say that at the table. He looked back. Jenna was watching him, as if she had a leash in her hand. She'll say I knew. I asked, did you? He closed his eyes. That was enough for me to step away. At the table, Thomas had already written private deal attempt across a yellow pad. Frank Mercer was on his phone with someone he called Deputy Morales, explaining without drama that an estate attorney had possible medication tampering indicators, preserved household evidence, and witnesses still on scene. Jenna heard Deputy and moved toward her purse. Ellen blocked her without touching her. You said you needed the bathroom. Your purse doesn't. Jenna looked at Mark. Are you going to let them treat me like a criminal?
Mark did not answer fast enough. That was his first betrayal of her. Frank ended the call. Deputy Morales is 20 minutes out. Until then, I am asking everyone to stay visible and not leave with bags, phones, papers, medication containers, or anything from Ruth Bennett's bedroom. You have no authority, Jenna said. Frank answered, correct. That is why I called someone who does. Thomas slid a blank statement page toward Robert and Ellen. Write only what you personally saw and heard, not what you think it means. Robert picked up the pen. That was when the family room stopped being a debate and became a record. Jenna understood it at the same time I did. She turned toward the front hall. Frank did not chase her, he only said, Jenna. She stopped because everyone else looked. Phone on the table, Frank said. Absolutely not. He answered, then hold it up and do not unlock it. She said, this is harassment. Frank said, maybe. Or maybe it is a witness asking you not to delete anything until a deputy arrives. The word delete did more damage than search would have. Jenna's thumb was already against the side button. Mark saw it. What are you deleting? He asked. She spun on him. Are you serious? Mark repeated, what are you deleting? There it was, not conscience yet, but panic looking for a place to stand. Thomas took one step toward the table.
Jenna, if there are texts about Ruth's medication, the pharmacy pickup, the bag, or today's estate papers, deleting them now will be its own fact. She laughed, but it broke halfway through. You people are insane. I noticed she said you people again, not family, not dad, not Mark. You people. The house had finally stopped belonging to her version. Jenna put the phone face down on the table, not because she agreed, but because Mark was watching. Frank asked Ellen to write the time. Thomas sealed the torn pharmacy label separately. Robert wrote Jenna's whisper as best he remembered it and then asked me whether should have been gone needed quotation marks. I said, yes, it does. Outside, a car slowed in front of the house. Jenna looked toward the window. Mark looked at me. For a second I saw the boy from the parking lot again, holding a bicycle upright and waiting for me to promise he would not fall. I did not promise. The sheriff's car stopped by the curb. Deputy Morales did not come in like television. She came in with dust on her cuffs, a small notebook, and the expression of someone who had walked into enough family houses to know that the most dangerous rooms often smelled like coffee. Frank met her at the door and gave her the shortest version I had heard all day. Possible medication tampering concern after death, estate papers presented today, preserved items on table, witnesses present, no one detained. I asked everyone to keep phones and bags visible until you tell us what you want. Deputy Morales looked at Thomas. You counsel, estate counsel for Harold Bennett. And you, she asked Frank. Retired investigator, consultant. No authority. Good, she said. Then everyone remembers who has it. That sentence did more than raise her voice would have. Jenna went still. Mark looked at the floor. Robert let out a breath he had been holding since Ruth's bedroom. Deputy Morales asked me if anyone needed medical help. I said no. She asked whether there were weapons. I said no. She asked whether anyone had touched the items after Frank arrived. Frank answered with names, positions, and times. Then she looked at Jenna's phone on the table. Whose phone? Jenna lifted her chin. Mine. And I do not consent to a search. I didn't ask to search it. I asked whose it was. Thomas's mouth barely moved, but I knew approval when I saw it. The deputy put Jenna on the far side of the kitchen island, Mark near the sliding door, Robert by the hall, Ellen at the counter, and me at the end of the table. The house had been arranged before. Now it was separated. The estate folder sat in the middle, yellow tabs still bright. No one touched it. Deputy Morales asked why the folder mattered. Jenna answered first. Because Harold is trying to steal from his own son. The deputy wrote steal in her notebook. Then looked at me. Mr. Bennett. The folder contains draft transfers for my house and estate control.
Jenna brought it today after Ruth's service. I did not request it. I did not sign it. Thomas added, I advise my client not to sign anything today. Given the medication concerns and the pressure witnessed here, no transfer will happen from this table. Jenna laughed. Pressure. We were helping him. Deputy Morales looked at Robert. Did you see pressure? Robert's hand shook around the pen. I saw Jenna tell him to sign the house and everything else to Mark. I heard her say Ruth was gone. I heard her laugh. Jenna's face went flat. I didn't laugh like that. Ellen said, you laughed. The deputy did not react. That helped. She wrote, asked for spelling, and moved on. Procedure has its own mercy, it does not gasp when your family shows itself. Mark said, those papers were just drafts. Prepared by whom? Deputy Morales asked. No one answered. Thomas slid the folder toward the deputy without opening it. I can provide copies. Originals stay with Harold, unless you instruct otherwise. Copies first, she said. That was the moment the house stopped being a prize. The yellow tabs were no longer invitations. They were part of why a deputy was standing in my kitchen. Jenna understood that before Mark did. This is all because of a DNA test, she said. I said, no. It is because Ruth died, and you brought a pen. Deputy Morales separated the statements next. Robert wrote at the kitchen table with Frank sitting near him, not coaching, only reminding him to write, saw and heard, instead of thought. Ellen wrote at the counter. Thomas copied the receipt, the binder page, Ruth's 2 letters, and the doorbell still. The old phone stayed in its bag. Jenna's phone stayed face down. Mark's phone joined it after the deputy asked where his Friday texts were. I don't consent to a search either, Mark said. I have not asked to search it, Deputy Morales said. I am asking you not to destroy anything while I determine whether a report is appropriate. A report about what? Possible elder medication interference, estate pressure, and evidence preservation after a death. Jenna said, elder. Ruth was 65. Deputy Morales looked at her. A dead woman with medication concerns does not get less dead because you dislike the word. That shut the room down. Frank labeled each item with plain descriptions, not dramatic ones. Torn pharmacy label. Old phone with voice memo. Printed doorbell still. Medication binder copy. Estate transfer draft. Ruth sealed letter copy. Witness notes. I watched the words become smaller than the grief, and stronger than it. Mark sat with both hands between his knees. Jenna did not sit. She stood like sitting would make the day real. When Deputy Morales asked her whether she had brought the estate folder, Jenna said, Mark and I did. When the deputy asked whose idea it was, Jenna said, family. For the first time, Mark corrected her. It was yours, he said. Jenna turned on him so fast that Deputy Morales lifted her hand. Do not start a side argument, the deputy said. Jenna swallowed whatever she had been about to say, it stayed in her throat and changed shape. Mark was the one who went there Friday, she said. Mark looked at her as if she had slapped him. There it was, the first open split, not conscience, survival. But survival can tell the truth by accident. Deputy Morales wrote without looking impressed. You mean he went to Ruth's room with the pharmacy bag? I mean he went because Ruth called him. Earlier you said Ruth didn't want too many people in the house. Jenna's mouth closed. Frank's pen stopped for half a second. Thomas's did not. Mark said, you told me she was scared. Jenna said, she was. You told me Dad was going to change everything and leave us with nothing. The deputy looked at me. Had you told anyone that? No. Thomas said, Ruth had scheduled a trust consultation. Harold had not yet acted. Jenna pointed at Thomas. See, they were going to cut Mark out. I said, Ruth was going to ask why you were asking about the trust before she was dead. Nobody moved after that. Deputy Morales asked whether Jenna would voluntarily show that her purse and car held no estate folder, pharmacy bag, or Ruth's items before leaving later. Jenna refused. The deputy wrote refused. That one word changed Jenna's face more than shouting would have. The house, my house, Ruth's house, no longer waited to be signed over. It was holding them in place. Mark looked smaller after that. I do not say that with satisfaction. A grown son can become small in a room without becoming innocent. He sat with his phone on the table. His wife was across from him. A deputy was writing down the shape of his choices. For 1 second I saw what he had been trying to avoid all day. Not jail, not scandal, not even losing the house. He was trying to avoid being seen by me. Deputy Morales asked him whether he would make a voluntary statement before she took the preliminary report. Thomas told him he could decline. Jenna told him to shut up. Frank told no one anything. Mark looked at Ruth's chair. Then he looked at me.
Did you ever love me? The room should not have heard that question. It belonged in a truck on a dark road, or a hospital hallway, or maybe 29 years earlier, when truth still had time to be less cruel. But he asked it in front of the estate folder, the torn label, the old phone, the deputy, and the woman who had laughed over Ruth's death. I did not answer quickly. Quick would have been mercy. He had spent the day spending mercy that was not his. Jenna whispered, "Mark, don't." That told me she feared the answer more than he did. Deputy Morales lowered her pen. Thomas looked down. Frank Mercer looked at the table, not at me, giving an old man the small privacy left in a room full of evidence.
I wanted to say yes and stop there. I wanted to say of course. I wanted to make the boy from the parking lot steady on his bicycle again. Instead, I looked at the bagged phone, Ruth's letter, and the transfer papers. That, I said, is the question you should have asked before Friday night. I did not answer Mark's question the way he wanted. If I said yes, he would try to crawl inside it. If I said no, I would be lying in the only room where Ruth had made lying impossible. So I gave him the truth with the part he could not use. I loved you before I knew, I said. I loved you after I knew. I loved you when you broke the garage window, when you failed algebra, and when you called from Fresno at 2 in the morning because your first wife had locked you out. I loved you when Ruth said I was too hard on you, and when I knew she was right. Mark's mouth trembled. Jenna looked at him with alarm, not sympathy. Blood did not remove you from this family, I said. Ruth's death did.
Deputy Morales wrote nothing for a moment. Then she wrote that. Mark wiped his face with the heel of his hand. You don't know what happened. No, I said. I know what Ruth feared. I know what you carried in. I know what disappeared. I know what you tried to trade by the sliding door. He closed his eyes. I was scared, he said. Jenna snapped. Mark. He did not look at her. She said Mom was changing everything. She said you knew about me and were just waiting to humiliate me. She said if the trust changed before we knew what was in it, we'd be out. So you brought the bag, I said. He answered. I brought what Jenna gave me. I asked, and when Ruth asked, he covered his mouth. That was answer enough for the deputy to ask him if he wanted to continue without counsel. Thomas looked at me, not Mark. I understood. My son was not confessing to me. He was stepping into something formal. And I could not pull him back without stepping over Ruth. Deputy Morales paused the questioning and advised Mark again that he did not have to keep speaking. He nodded like he understood, but his eyes stayed on me. I didn't know she would get worse, he said. Jenna laughed through her nose. Stop talking. Mark said louder. I didn't. You said it was vitamins. You said she was taking the wrong things anyway. You said she was confused and Dad was going to let Ellen take everything. Jenna's control broke for the first time. Because you were too weak to ask for what was yours. Deputy Morales lifted her hand. Jenna, stop. But the sentence had already done its work. Yours. Not Ruth's. Not Harold's. Not estate planning. Yours. Thomas wrote it down. Frank did too. Mark looked at her as if he had finally found the bottom of the well. You told me to get the bag back. Jenna said, I told you not to leave trash around. Mark answered, you told me if the bag stayed they could match the pickup. The room went silent in a new way. Deputy Morales asked Mark to stop and wait for formal questioning. He kept talking because panic has poor manners. I didn't change anything. I brought it. I left it. She was alive when I left. Alive when I left. Those 4 words did not save him. They moved him from son to witness, from witness to possible participant, from possible participant to the man who had known enough to mark the time. I gripped the edge of the table. Ruth's chair was beside me, empty, still pulled back. Thomas put a form in front of me. This authorizes me to preserve copies, notify the trustee records office, and send a written hold notice, he said. It applies to anyone trying to record a transfer from today's papers. It does not decide inheritance. It protects the estate while this is reviewed. Estate, reviewed, hold notice. Small words compared with wife and son. Stronger in that moment. I signed. Jenna said, so there it is, he gets the house. Deputy Morales looked at her. Who is he? Jenna said, Harold. The deputy asked, this is Harold's house. Jenna said nothing.
Thomas added another page. This instructs that no successor trustee change, deed transfer, beneficiary update or account access change is to be accepted without my written review and Harold's direct confirmation. Jenna said, "You can't lock Mark out of his mother's estate." Thomas answered, "Watch me protect Ruth's records." I signed that, too. Mark watched the pen move. "Dad." I said, "No." He said, "I wasn't going to ask for the house." I answered, "You already did. You just used Jenna's mouth." That hit him harder than I expected, maybe because it was true in a way he could not hand back to her. Frank took the signed instructions, copied them, and placed the originals in a folder Thomas labeled Estate Protection. Deputy Morales logged the time. The deputy did not look satisfied. Good. Satisfaction would have meant this was over. It was not over.
It had only moved out of Jenna's preferred room. From the table to statements, from signatures to records, from family pressure to formal consequence. I felt no triumph, only the strange exhaustion of a man who had finally put a door between his dead wife and the people still reaching for her things. Deputy Morales took Mark into the front room for a separate preliminary statement. Jenna objected until the deputy told her she could either wait silently in the kitchen or step onto the porch with another unit when it arrived. Jenna chose silence, but it sat on her like a bad coat. Through the open doorway, I heard only pieces. No, I didn't know what was in it. She said Mom was mixed up. I thought Dad was going to erase me. Each sentence tried to save him by making him smaller. I knew that trick. Parents teach it without meaning to. We forgive children because they are not finished yet. And sometimes the adult child keeps reaching for that unfinished version like a legal defense.
Mark was finished enough to bring the bag, finished enough to hide the visit, finished enough to stand behind Jenna while she laughed. When he came back, he looked 10 years older and 10 years younger at once. I told her what I knew. I said, "Good." He asked, "That's all?" I said, "For now." He sat down across from Ruth's chair and touched the edge of the table. I remember when she taught me to shelve books at the library. I did not answer. He said, she'd make me alphabetize paperbacks because I kept getting in trouble after school. I said, "I remember." He said, "She wasn't my blood either." I said, "No." He said, "But she was my mother." I looked at the estate folder, then at the old phone in its bag. "Then you should have protected her before you protected your inheritance." His hand left the table. That was the first time I saw him understand that childhood could explain the wound and still not pay the debt. Thomas gathered the signed instructions and asked me one final question before the deputy left. "Do you want Mark listed as your son in the estate protection notice?" The room tightened around the answer. Legally, the old documents still called him that. Life had called him that longer than law. My mouth knew the word better than it knew some prayers. Jenna watched me with a strange hungry hope. If I said no, she could call me cruel. If I said yes, she could use the word, son, to keep reaching. I said, use his full legal name. No relationship label. Mark lowered his head. Thomas wrote it exactly. Deputy Morales took the preliminary report number from her radio and gave Thomas the instructions for submitting copies. Frank sealed his notes. Ellen finished her statement and put both hands flat on the counter, as if she needed the house to hold her up. Robert asked whether he should stay. I said no. Not because I wanted to be alone, but because Ruth's house had held enough witnesses for one day. Jenna and Mark were not arrested. That matters. Stories lie when they pretend every hard consequence arrives with handcuffs before dinner. They were told not to contact me about the estate, not to remove or destroy anything related to Ruth's medication, and to expect follow-up. Jenna called it harassment. Mark did not. When they finally stepped onto the porch, he turned once. Dad. I did not correct him in front of the deputy. I did not answer either. After the cars left, the kitchen looked staged by strangers. Copied papers, cold coffee, yellow tabs, Ruth's chair still pulled back. I stood behind that chair for a long time. Then I pushed Mark's chair in. Ruth stayed exactly where it was. The next morning did not bring justice. It brought phone calls. That is the part stories usually skip because phone calls do not shine. Thomas called the trust company, the county recorder's office, and the bank where Ruth kept her separate account. Deputy Morales sent the preliminary report number. Frank Mercer took the copied evidence to a former colleague,
who still knew which desk handled suspicious death follow-ups, when the first death certificate did not tell the whole story. No one said murder. No one said solved. No one said Mark and Jenna were finished. The first consequence was smaller and harder to argue with. Nothing moved. No deed. No trustee change. No account access update. No estate folder for my kitchen became a path to a signature. Thomas sent written notice that any document dated that day had been presented under disputed circumstances, after Ruth Bennett's death and before medication questions were resolved. Jenna texted at 9:14 a.m. "You destroyed your only son because you couldn't handle the truth." I showed it to Thomas. He took a screenshot, saved it, and told me not to answer. Not answering felt like lifting something heavy and holding it in the air. At 10:30, a locksmith came because Thomas said grief was not a security plan. The man changed the back door, the garage side door, and the old kitchen lock Ruth hated because it's stuck in winter. I watched each key come off the ring Mark had used since high school. The locksmith asked if I wanted extra copies. 2, I said. 1 for me, 1 for Thomas's file. None for Mark. Mark called once before noon. I let it ring. He left a message I did not play until Thomas was present. That was how my life had changed. Even my son's voice had become something I should not handle alone. The message was 42 seconds. "Dad, I didn't know it would go like this. Jenna said Ruth was trying to turn you against me. I thought if we waited, everything would be gone. I know that sounds bad. I know. Just tell them I didn't change anything. Tell them I brought the bag and left. That's all. Please." Thomas saved it. "Do you want to call him back?" he asked. "No." He nodded, not approving, not judging. A good attorney knows some decisions are not legal. By late afternoon, Deputy Morales called to say a follow-up investigator would contact Thomas, not me, for the copies. She used careful words. Reviewed, forwarded, supplemental, possible interview. Nothing that would satisfy a crowd. Everything that mattered. Jenna sent another text from Mark's phone that evening. "You made him say things. Ruth would hate you for this." I looked at Ruth's chair before I answered the question in my head. No, I thought. Ruth would hate that it came to this. That was different. I did not reply. The house went quiet in pieces. First the locksmith's drill stopped, then Thomas left. Then Ellen took the lilies from the memorial service because she said they were making the kitchen smell like a chapel. When the door closed behind her, I heard the refrigerator again. Ordinary sound, wrong house. That evening, Thomas returned with one more statement for me to review. It was not dramatic. It said I had provided copies voluntarily. It said I had not handled Ruth's medication containers after discovering the missing organizer. It said I requested that all estate transfers be held pending review. It said Mark Bennett was my legal son in old documents, and that I was not relying on DNA alone for any estate action. I stopped at the phrase, "my son." Thomas saw it. "We can change that sentence." I said, "Use his name." He said, "Harold." I said again, "Use his name." He changed it to Mark Bennett. The page did not burst into flames. The house did not shake. I only felt something inside me step back from a doorway it had stood in for most of my adult life. I signed. After Thomas left, I went to Ruth's bookshelves. Not the shelf with the valuable first editions she pretended not to care about. The shelf by her reading chair, where the spines were cracked and the dust jackets had tape repairs. Her favorite was a plain old copy of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. She said every librarian had a book that taught them people could be poor in money and rich in wanting. Inside the front cover was an old checkout slip from before computers took over the world. I found her green library card in Thomas's copy envelope. He had returned it because it was not evidence anymore. It had done its work, marked the notebook, marked the envelope, marked the path Ruth left behind. I held it by the edges. The signature on the back was young. Ruth Bennett, written before she became my Ruth. Before Mark, before pills, before trust papers and deputy notebooks. I put the card inside her favorite book. Not hidden. Placed. The next day brought no thunder either. It brought a certified letter from Thomas's office to Mark and Jenna. No direct estate contact, no access to the house, no use of old keys, no communication except through counsel, while the medication concerns and estate documents were under review. It was not a restraining order. It was not a sentence. It was a locked gate made of paper, and for people who had expected an open door, paper was enough to bruise. Jenna responded from her own number this time. "Keep your house. It will be a museum to what you did." I read it once, sent it to Thomas, and deleted the notification from my screen. Not the message, the notification. I had learned the difference. Frank called in the afternoon. He said the investigator had accepted the old phone copy, the receipt, the doorbell file, and the witness statements for review. He said the pharmacy would need a formal request. He said not to expect speed. "Speed is how they tried to take the house," I said. Frank answered, "Then slow is fine."
When I hung up, I walked through the rooms and made a list of things that still belonged to Mark. Old baseball glove in the garage, 2 boxes of college papers, a jacket Ruth had kept because she said men never knew when they were cold. I did not throw them away. Revenge is not cleaning with anger. I put them in the laundry room, sealed the boxes, and wrote his full name on them. Then I went back to the kitchen table. There were 3 chairs on the long side because Ruth liked odd numbers. Mine, Ruth's, Mark's. Jenna had sat wherever she could command the room, but Mark's chair had always been the 3rd one. I put both hands on its back. For a minute, I could not move it. Then I did. The chair scraped louder than I expected. I carried it to the wall by the laundry room and left it there, not hidden, not broken, not dramatic, just out of place. That was all I could do without turning grief into theater. Ruth's chair stayed pulled back from the table. Mine stayed where it had always been. For dinner I made toast and did not eat it. I sat in my chair and looked at hers. The house was safer than it had been 2 days earlier. The locks were changed, the papers were held. The evidence was out of my hands. Mark and Jenna could no longer walk in with a folder and call it family. That was consequence. It was not peace. Peace would have been Ruth complaining that I burned the toast. Peace would have been Mark calling because his water heater broke, and Ruth telling me not to sound too pleased about being needed. Peace would have been never learning how quickly a person can turn love into access. I opened Ruth's favorite book once more before bed. The green library card rested inside the cover, her young signature facing up. I did not pray over it. Ruth disliked public displays even in private. I only touched the edge of the card and closed the book. In the morning, someone would call. Thomas, Deputy Morales, Frank, maybe Mark, from a number I did not know. The process would continue in rooms where I would not get the last word. That was fine. The last word had never belonged to me, it belonged to Ruth. In blue ink, in a sealed envelope she wrote because she knew love could make a man polite when he needed to be exact. I turned off the kitchen light. In the dark, 2 chairs stood at the table, one for me, one for Ruth. The 3rd stayed by the laundry room wall, with Mark Bennett's name on the boxes beside it.